you'll notice there that I put a note on the blog that we're going to have an exam this day, 2 weeks. Okay, so it's going to be a one-sheet exam. So it's like an open book exam, but you can just bring one sheet of A4, but you can decide whatever you want to put on it. So it can be one sheet, front and back. You can have big writing or tiny, 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 tiny writing. Whatever you want yourself, you can put on that sheet. If you're industrious, you might even, start a cottage business in sheet production. Sell them for €1 or something, but it's up to you what you put on it. Okay, so it's a bit like an open book exam, only not quite. Do I have any more information than that? I suppose no. It'll just be on HTML and not CSS. But HTML would include image maps, which you haven't seen yet. That's what we're doing this week. Okay? So any questions on that? I can't imagine.
How much percent do you?
Oh, it's a very good question. It's 20%. So it's 20, 40, 40. 20 for this one. Then assignment 1 will be 40 and assignment 2 will be 40 and assignment 3 will be 40. Last time out, assignment 1 was an exam like this one. Assignment 2 was a web page, and assignment 3 was a program that you write. Sometimes in the past, assignment 3 was a written exam, but I don't think that's going to happen this time out. So I could probably tell you what assignment 2 is fairly soon, really. I wonder would actually be a better use of, I'm probably not organised now, I wonder would it be a better use of our time today to go through that, but maybe not. I'll do it in one of the labs maybe. Okay, so any questions on that? So this day, 2 weeks is October 30th, yeah?
How much time do we have for this?
The time we have in the class.
We free reign to write whatever code we want.
Hmm?
We free reign to write whatever code we want, like HTML, whatever. Just write tables and lists and stuff.
Well, the exam isn't going to say come and write some HTML. I mean, it's going to be more specific than that. Yeah. That's like, I'll probably give you, for example, I give you a list in a table and say, write the HTML for that. Or I could give you a list. No, there won't be CSS as such. Actually, no, there'll be no CSS. So just HTML. Okay? No, 10's gone way down all of a sudden. Righty-ho. So it'll be on, well, I'm not going to say what it's going to be on, but it could look like a table and an image map or something like that. And write the HTML for these things.
Will there be colours involved?
Will there be colours involved? Potentially, yes. But not kind of like, not distinguishing between, purple and puce, just like the basics. So, red, green, blue, yellow, cyan, black, white, and grey. I'd say if you could do those, you know enough about colours. And pink. Gotta have pink. So apart from that, that's all you need to know about colours. It won't be like, actually it'll be a cool exam, but there won't be anyway. It won't be on it. Like, match these colours to these codes. That's a nice idea, but it won't be doing that. Yeah. Any more inspiration from you there? Okay. So it'll be worth 20%. So I'll try and maybe give you I might even, if I'm very organised, I'll rustle up a sample today. And do any of you got class with me today?
Yeah.
Oh, well, lucky you then. Okay, so I'll try and have that organised in time for the 2 o'clock class, okay? just to give you an idea. What I would like to do now today is just very briefly talk a little bit about the internet very generally. This is something we might have done on the first day we met, only I wanted us to do actual real work, okay? So I was a bit keen for us to start writing HTML. But what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little step back and think about the internet a little bit more generally. So as you know from you're doing networking this semester? Yeah. So you probably know way more about networking than I do already. So networking allows computers to talk to each other. You know that. And networks can have different configurations, you know. Just make sure I mark you in before you get away. Networks can have different configurations, different topologies. So on the top there we have like a linear one. And you could also have, you know, a star type configuration. And they have various degrees of robustness. So if, for example, if I had a linear type network and one of the nodes there failed, well then the ones downstream from that would be disconnected from the rest of the network. So sometimes CIT gets disconnected from the outside world because somebody cuts a cable somewhere. And we can talk to each other in CIT, but we can't talk to things outside. So depending on the way the network is designed, it can be fairly robust or not so much. Now, you're too young to remember, but there was a time when people imagined that the Russians were going to attack us with nuclear weapons. You know, little did we realize in Europe all they had to do was turn off the gas, and we'd freeze to death. But anyway, so the US military gave money to colleges to develop various kinds of technologies. You might have heard of DARPA. Yeah. You know, well, the internet came out of DARPA initially. And the idea was that they wanted to develop a network that could survive a nuclear attack. So, let me just see here. Imagine you had a network that had sort of a center where all the information went into one point and out to the other. Does anyone know where that is? Doesn't look like anywhere really, does it? It's one of those flyover states. Anyway, so if you had all your information going into this point and out again, well, if you nuked that spot there, you know, then that's the whole network down. The people then in Miami, that's not Miami. It's somewhere in Florida, but that's not Miami, definitely not. Is it?
It's Miami, yeah.
Is that Miami? Is Miami that far north? I thought Miami was a bit further south. Anyway, the people in that place there can't talk to the people in New York. And the people in Texas are cut off. And the people in San Francisco and Los Angeles could still talk to each other, but they probably wouldn't want to do that anyway. Now, if you had then a network where there are possible routes, different routes that information could take from one point to the next, then the network as a whole would be more likely to survive. Obviously the places that have been nuked, well, they're gone, like you'd write them off. But the rest of the network could keep going. And so they designed this network where the information could be rerouted dynamically from place to place. So if you nuked, you know, one place, you could have the president in one place, the vice president in another, a few generals in another, and as long as the network as long as they could keep communicating, the network could keep going, and you could live to fight another day. So the design of the network allowed data to have a load of different possible routes from A to B. So a message going from New York to San Francisco could maybe take multiple routes. And it was designed first day that if one of the nodes was down, well, it could just, you know, work around it. And the colleges thought that was a great thing. They connected up all the other colleges, and eventually they connected up to other different parts of the world. And we eventually got the internet as we know it. It turned out the military wasn't that keen on it because it wasn't terribly secure. But it gave us the internet that we have today. And many of the issues and problems that come up with the internet then today come out of the fact that no one owns it. It's It's not like, say, the telephone network, where at one stage the government or the state owned it, but you had all these different points you could, turn things on and off. The internet really is very decentralized, and no one owns it, and no one's really in charge of it. And also, it's if you take out one part of it, well, it doesn't really shut down the internet. It doesn't really stop people doing what they were doing, because it was designed first day to be able to survive parts of it being shut down. Now, you do have situations like in China, where everything coming in and out goes, through one or two points that are controlled. But for the most part, the internet is very decentralized, and no one owns it. So if someone's doing something then you don't like, it can be hard to stop them. Now, there are a bunch of different things you could do on the internet. Notice I haven't used the word web yet now. So the internet supported a bunch of different messaging protocols, different ways of sending information. So email was very popular and still is. So email was one of the earliest things you could do. FTP was a thing called file transfer protocol. You don't see that so much anymore, although you do sometimes use FTP if you're uploading things to websites. And what FTP does is, if there's a file on another computer, you can log in. It's command line, it's quite ugly. You do ding, 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 and it takes a copy of that file and puts it onto your computer. Or you can take a file from your computer and copy it onto another computer at some remote site. And that's the file transfer protocol. Telnet is, well, I haven't used Telnet now in a while. I haven't seen it in a long time. Telnet allows you to log into your computer from another location. So I remember years and years ago, when I was away, if I wanted to check my email at UCC, I would have to telnet into the computer at UCC, and then it would appear as if I was sitting at the computer at UCC, and I'd do my business, and then I'd log out. I do see some students in other classes actually, instead of doing a lab in the class, they actually connect up to their computer at home, and they see on the screen a copy of the computer they have at home, and they do all the stuff there. So that's a kind of telnet. You don't see telnet so much anymore. So there's a whole bunch of different ways of transferring data from one place to another. Now, hypertext transfer protocol then was developed, when? I suppose the early 90s. And this was developed at CERN. Have you heard of CERN? Every so often we hear, they're doing some big experiment in France and it's going to open a big black hole and we're all going to be sucked in. That's CERN. Okay? So CERN was producing a lot of scientific papers. And at the time, so I was around at that time, not at CERN obviously. If someone had a research paper and you wanted to get it, what you would do is you would FTP into their website, and there might be a file that said, like list.txt or something. You'd copy that file down, and that would have a list of all of the other files and what might be in them. So then you see, okay, there's that paper that I'm interested there, that's called whatever. So then you'd FTP back in again, and then copy down the file that you wanted and have a look at it. Now, this guy at CERN came up with a markup language that was based loosely on something that was around already called LaTeX, and this allowed information for public consumption to be easily read and transferred. And so he developed HTTP, HTML, and then he would have written a browser as well, although the people came along then subsequently and wrote better browsers. Actually, the next time people are on the radio bitching about government employees, we should point out that it was a government employee that invented the internet. Now, so let's have a think now what happens when you look at a web page. The internet is so fast now, or your connections to the internet are so fast, that it all seems to happen instantaneously. But there's a lot going on there underneath, and it's important to understand what's happening. So you have your browser, and the browser is a program that you can use to look at web pages. Now, I don't need to explain to you that the internet isn't in your computer, like. It's out there, and the browser is just something you use to look at it. Children and old people don't understand that so much. Okay, but you understand that. There are different browsers: Internet Explorer, Opera, Safari, Firefox, and Chrome. On this list, we used to have Netscape. Netscape would have been, you know, one of the first main browsers, but it got eclipsed by Internet Explorer, and then Firefox came along, and that was the end of Netscape, really. So different browsers. In the early days, the browsers did different things, but they're all pretty fairly standard now. So when someone clicks on a link then, right, so the link on a web page, and someone can click on that link, and that's a URL to another page. Alternatively, people can type in a URL. Now this is where you start to show your age, in that people your age, for some reason, Google everything. So even if you know you want to go to www.cit.ie, people your age will go to Google and do www.cit.ie and Google that, rather than actually go up to the menu bar and type in www.cit.ie. I've heard tell of people Googling Google. But whereas old people like me, someone like me, if I know I want to go to www.cit.ie, I'll just go up to the address bar and do www.cit.ie and go straight there. But people don't do that so much anymore. Anyway, either way, you're looking at a link to a page. It was either clicked on or typed in. And so then the browser sends that out into the network, and it goes through its domain name servers and whatnot, and it eventually finds the web server that has that page. So there's a server somewhere with that web page. Now, until very recently, actually, when you were talking about a server having the web page, you were quite literally talking about a server in a room somewhere. Increasingly, though, it's more a virtual thing. You know, there isn't one box, you know, plugged into a wall somewhere that's running all of Amazon, like. You couldn't build one big enough. So conceptually, it's a single server, but it may in fact be many. But we think of it as one server. So that server just sits there all day, and requests come in for a page, for a file. It goes away, gets the file, and sends it back. So using the URL that comes in, it figures out this person wants page 2.html. There you go. This person wants page 5.html. There you go. This person wants bookings.html. There you go. That's all it does all day. So it's a computer that sits there all day serving up web files or HTML files. Now, so that comes across the network and comes back then to the browser as a HTML file. It's at that point then that the browser looks at the HTML and decides what the page should look like. And it's the browser that decides what the page looks like. That's a very important point, I think, that's often lost on people. The browser decides this goes here, this goes here, this isn't this font, this isn't this font, based on the instructions in the HTML file. But it's not like the server has the page laid out and sends it off. The browser decides what the page looks like. Now, if the page then contains an image, so if you have an image tag in there, well then the browser goes back onto the web and sends a message back to the server saying, hi server, I need photo5.jpg, and it sends it off. Photo2.jpg sends it off. So they come later. Now, in the early days of the internet, you could actually see that. Your page would download, and then the first image would eventually download and appear, and then the next one, and then maybe the last one. You know, it took a while. Now it's just boom, boom. So it all appears instant, but it's not. The browser gets the HTML file, and if there are image tags in there, has to go away and get those then as well. But it all happens fairly quickly. Different browsers may render the page slightly differently. So that's an important point. In the early days, the browsers were falling over themselves to come up with funky new tags as well. But it's fairly standardized now, but even so, the way the page is going to look can vary slightly from browser to browser. And as a web developer, you have to get over that. You have to get over yourself. You don't have total and complete control. You see some people going, oh no, there's a pixel between this image, and I wanted them to be, completely flush. Get over yourself. You don't have complete control over what the page is going to look like. You specify, you give the browser your instructions, and then you let it do its thing. And you hope that it does a decent job of it. That's why it's very important to concentrate on specifying the structure of the document rather than being too hung up on the appearance. If the person surfing the web looks for a file that's not there, maybe they typed in the URL incorrectly, or it points to a file that wasn't there, or there was a mistake, we call that a broken link, by the way. Now you don't see many of those anymore either, because you have lots of automated tools now that will catch those, but you shouldn't have any of those. Okay, we've seen what HTML looks like. Modern browsers can display quite a few different formats, but realistically speaking, only GIF, JPEG, and PNG would be considered standard. So GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format. JPEG, that's how that's pronounced, is Joint Photographics Experts Group, and PNG is Portable Network Graphics. So it's a JPEG, a PNG, and then a GIF or a GIF. Now technically I think the GIF, there's big nerds and beer like lads, big fights in the pub, in the nerd pub, but is it GIF or is it GIF, okay? Technically I think the GIF people probably are right, but certainly in Ireland most people call it GIF. And I think GIF is acceptable to everyone, whereas some people find GIF offensive just because they're being superior uber nerds, and so go with GIF. Okay. We've seen HTML already, hypertext markup language, and blah de blah de blah de blah de blah. So any questions on that? So the important point there is that there are many different things you can do on the internet. The internet is older than me, okay? The internet has been around a very, very, very long time. The web is very new. The web is not the internet. They're not the same thing. The internet is the physical and technological and software architecture. It's like the infrastructure that's there. And then the web is just one of the things that runs on that infrastructure. But you have email, which is different from the web, FTP, Telnet, which you don't see anymore. You have your Skype, you have your instant messaging, you have your streaming video. These are all different protocols that are built on top of the internet. So for the muggles, it's okay to talk about the internet and the web as the same thing, okay? But you're professionals now, okay? The web and the internet are not the same thing at all. Big difference for you guys. So you can't use those terms interchangeably. So the World Wide Web is a collection of web pages that are possibly connected to each other with links. And they're written in HTML and CSS and maybe a sprinkling of JavaScript. The internet is the road. Okay, the web is just, cars. But you can have trucks and buses and other stuff. Any questions on any of that? So a bit waffly, but important distinctions. And just remember, if you are using an image, really you can only use GIF, PNG, or JPEG. But we look at those a bit more.
What's the difference between JPEG and JPG?
The difference between JPEG and JPEG? None, except the cool people will call it JPEG. Okay? So you pronounce JPEG, you pronounce that one JPEG as opposed to JPEG, and then GIF or GIF and PNG. I guess because ping would be hard to say. But so that's how you pronounce them. In any discipline, really, the language of the discipline is very important. You know, that's how you can distinguish the pros from the chancers. So it's important to get the words right. Any other questions? No, I'll talk. I could talk forever, really, about the difference between GIF, JPEG, and PNG and how they work. I love all that stuff. So we'll do some of that just because I like it, and it might be of use to you as well. Any questions? Grand. So I'll try and have a sample exam sorted out by today. It probably won't be online. It'll probably just be on paper. I'll probably just, open a filing cabinet and grab something on paper and photocopy it, rather than actually type something. So yeah, 2 weeks we'll have that exam. It'll be in here, and you can bring your one sheet. You could start working that now if you want to figure out what's important, what's not, or what things are so obvious to you they don't need saying, and other things maybe you do need to say. It's very, very important, I think, in HTML to understand that there's not really a kind of right. There's a right way to do something, and if you don't do it that way, it's just wrong. So if you don't close off your TD tags, it doesn't really help you to say, well, I knew it was, a table, and I knew there was, TRs and TDs and stuff. If you don't close off every TD tag, if you don't close every tag that you open, that's just wrong. It's not kind of right. It's not nearly right. It's not half right. It's just wrong, and it can be very, very frustrating if you write HTML that's wrong, and then you look in the browser, and the browser goes, oh yeah, that's grand. Here's what you said. Here's what you meant to say. It's still wrong. And that can be very, very frustrating. I find students find that very frustrating because it looks fine when they look in the browser, but it's still wrong. So it's important to be very, very precise in HTML. Most of the things we talked about aren't really negotiable. You must have your HTML to open it. You must have the header. You must have the title in the header. You must have the body. You can only have one body tag. You must have a slash body at the end. You must have a slash HTML at the end. If you don't do those things, it's not mostly right, it's wrong. So that can be very frustrating. So you do need that degree of perfection, I guess, is the word. So again, that's something that would distinguish you really from the, amateurs. Because kind of at home in your bedroom tinkering, that's grand. But we're not at that level anymore. This is the big time. Any other questions? I'm starting to waffle, haven't I? Yeah, we leave it there. So, okay.